Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. Jerry Kilroy answered the phone. Hello? Jerry. It's me. It was Kelly, Jerry's older sister. Her voice was strained. Hi, Kelly. What's the matter? Dad. He got worse. I should have called you. Jerry started. His father was barely 68 years old when he had a heart attack 3 months ago. He successfully underwent triple bypass surgery. He stayed in the hospital for a week, and then, when his condition stabilized, he was discharged. But what happened? Jerry asked. He was fine when I was with you. I know, but he became depressed. The doctor says he had a stroke. Stroke? Oh shit, Jerry exclaimed. But last week the doctor was sure that he was recovering well. I thought he had recovered and was now recovering at home. He is at home. That is, of course, Uncle Tony's. It is assumed that the stroke was minor, but with his poor health, even a minor stroke is serious. Oh, yes. Thank God the worst didn't happen, he replied. He knew that after the operation, his parents moved in with their friends, the Blaylocks. In their marriage, his father was always the stronger partner. He was the rock that his emotionally fragile mother clung to. Jerry remembered from early childhood that his mother never took stress well. So when her husband came down with a heart attack, it was no surprise that she turned to her old friend Agnes Blaylock and her husband Anthony. Not being blood relatives, they have always been family friends. Jerry, Kelly, and his other sister, Katie, considered the Blaylocks to be almost family members. They all grew up calling them Uncle Tony and Aunt Agnes. No, it's not. It's not good, Jerry. I've never seen him like this. Can't you come back? Dad really needs us right now, and so does Mom. I'm sure we do, he agreed. Okay, let me handle things with Olivia. I'm not sure she'll be able to take time off from her job. Maybe I'll come back alone. Okay, hurry up if you can. Dad is not feeling very well. How's Mom doing? There was a pause before Kelly answered uncertainly. She's fine. That sounded weird, Jerry thought. He expected her to explain further. Instead, there was another long pause before Kelly said in a serious tone, I need to talk to you about something. It is very important. Really? About what? I don't want to talk about it on the phone. I'll meet you when you get there. Just text me before you arrive. I need to talk to you alone first before I see Dad. It sounds mysterious. Can't you give me a hint? Just come as soon as possible. When you get there, I'll fill you in. Okay, then I'll see you in a few days. Thanks, Jerry. We will be very grateful. I can't wait to meet you. Me too, Kelly. See you soon. Jerry hung up the phone. A strange ending to their conversation. He couldn't imagine what to say that she couldn't say over the phone. He would have to find out later. Jerry knew that his father's health had not been very good lately. He never liked going to the gym, and he didn't have a habit of exercising. Although for many years he worked as an auto mechanic. He was drafted into the Army immediately after graduating from high school. He was trained and repaired military vehicles while serving in the Vietnam War. Despite the fact that Frank Kilroy did not participate in combat, he was always proud of his military service. But I've never talked about it with anyone outside the family. Even in the family circle, he mentioned it only on rare occasions. If asked, he always replied that service was his duty and he was proud to have served. Jerry once asked if he had ever been tempted to evade the draft. He said it as a joke to give Dad's chain a little tug. A stern look and a firm answer. Never. Never in this damn life. My father replied, making it clear that this was not an option. Jerry never joked about it again. Jerry knew a little about his time in Vietnam. Frank was stationed away from the main battlefields, but apparently not far enough, because a couple of years later he got into a shootout. He was seriously injured when shrapnel hit him in the neck and legs as a result of the explosion. The neck injury went away, but the leg injury turned out to be difficult. Since then, he has been walking with a pronounced limp. Frank finished his 4-year service in a hospital bed in Saigon, after which he was sent back to the United States. A few years later, he met his wife Edith. They got married, and Kelly was born to them immediately. 2 years later, Katie. They decided that 2 girls were enough. Edith started taking pills, and for the next 10 years they were a family of 4. It was a surprise for Edith to find out that she got pregnant again when she was already over 30. Next came their random child, Jerry, whom they loved as much as the other two children, despite the fact that it was a surprise. After returning home from work, Jerry informed his wife Olivia about his father's deteriorating health. As expected, she had already used up all her vacation days during their last visit to his father. She couldn't afford to take any more of them. So Jerry took a few days off the following week, left the house on Friday evening after work, loaded the car, and kissed his wife goodbye. It was a 4-hour drive to his hometown, but he was in a hurry and tried to get there faster. A few miles before his destination, he texted his sister. A message came in response. "I'll meet you at Cassin's Diner. You know where, right?" Jerry wrote back, "Yes, 20 minutes." Kelly was already sitting in the booth waiting and waved at him. Her light brown hair and soft features reminded him of their mother, who was a natural blonde. Katie was into it too. She had blonde hair and fair skin. Jerry always felt like he looked like his father, even though he was taller than him and had darker hair. He was also more muscular than his father, had dark, almost black hair, and could grow a beard in a couple of weeks. Even shaving in the morning, by the time he came home from work, he had a distinct 5 o'clock stubble. Kelly jumped up from her seat, and they exchanged warm hugs and kisses. "I'm glad you came, Jerry." "Of course. I want to help." Jerry noticed the concern on her face. Something serious was bothering her. They ordered coffee, and each took a cake. When the waitress left, Kelly gave her younger brother an appraising look and quickly lowered her eyes. "I don't know how to tell you about it," she said, staring at the table and biting her lip. "Just say it, Kelly. I know it bothers you." "Okay." She took a deep breath and exhaled. "Jerry, there's something you don't know about our family. It's about Uncle Tony." "Okay. You remember that Mom and the Blaylocks have been friends since college." "I know that. Mom and Aunt Agnes lived in the same room. They went to the same college and met Uncle Tony there." "I know that too. A couple of years after college, Mom met Dad at some party, and here we are." "So what?" "Well, they've all been friends ever since. Mom and Dad got married, and a few years later Tony and Agnes got married too. Mom was Agnes's bridesmaid." "Hey, that's right. I don't know if you know that. Before your birth, Dad had to leave town for a few months to study at a mechanic school. He was new to the company, and classes were held quite far from home. During his training, the company allowed him to come home only once and only for a couple of days. He used his veteran's allowance to pay for his tuition. During the time he was away, Mom seemed to get depressed and went a little crazy." "Are you crazy? What does it mean?" Kelly shook her head and said, "She did something stupid, Jerry. She had an affair with Tony." "What?" He shouted too loudly. The other customers looked at each other, so he tried to keep his voice down and said more quietly, "Mom? Was she having an affair? With Uncle Tony? What the hell?" "Yeah. Mom is definitely an idiot. I know that now." Jerry sat back down in his seat and tried to recover from this unexpected news. Did his mother cheat on his father with Tony Blaylock? Unbelievable. "And when did you find out?" he asked her. Kelly looked away, looking guilty. "I knew about it almost from the very beginning." "How is this possible?" "I knew that she dated him when Dad was at school. She'd hire a babysitter for us, and he'd pick her up from home. She said they were going out for dinner or a show. Dad and Tony were friends, and he was always at our house anyway. I just thought he was friendly at the time, trying to cheer her up because Mom was so sad when Dad wasn't there." "Didn't you think it was strange that he picked her up and took her to dinner? By the way, where was Agnes?" "I didn't think it was unusual at the time," Kelly said, genuinely trying to make him understand. "Agnes was with him a few times. So, she was undoubtedly aware of what was happening. They came to the house to pick up their mother, and when they left, they laughed and chatted happily. It looked pretty innocent. It also happened that he came alone and did some small work that his mother needed. I thought it was just a friend who helped her while Dad was away. That's all I thought at the time, and Mom let me think that way. I only realized she was cheating on him when I was in high school." "Did it take you that long?" "I'm sorry, Jerry. I should have told you something earlier. But I guess I was very trusting back then. Now I understand. Don't let it bother you, Kelly. You were just a kid, and you didn't know everything." There was a pause before Jerry asked, "I take it Katie knows too?" She gave him a sad look. "I can't keep secrets from her. You see, Sisters. Yes, I understand. Jerry's head was spinning from this news. He had never expected anything like this. He watched his older sister squirm in her seat, her eyes darting around as she took another breath. It was a bad sign. That's not all, is it? Yes. Unfortunately, she answered sadly. It's very hard. I hate to tell you this, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We already had too many secrets. She looked him straight in the face and stated categorically, Jerry, I'm not sure if Dad is your biological father. What? Me? Holy shit. Really? Yes. Sorry. I think you might be Uncle Tony's biological son. Kelly's voice broke as she made her statement. Then she broke down and brought her hands to her face. She began to sob slightly, looking at her dark-haired brother, who was startled. You're kidding. You've got to be kidding. Oh my God. A tear welled up in his eyes, and he quickly brushed it away before she saw it. No, but I would like to, she replied with a sob. But I'm not sure. I hope I'm wrong. I was talking to my mom about it the other day. She said she didn't know for sure either, but she thinks Tony got her pregnant then. You showed up a little more than 9 months after they had already started an affair. And your resemblance to Tony is too great to deny. My father never talked about it, so I don't think he realized this possibility yet. It took Kelly a moment to stop sobbing and speak. Until a few weeks ago, Mom let the cat out of the bag. How stupid she is. He was still recovering from a heart attack when she told him about her infidelity. Since then, Dad has been depressed. Perhaps that's why he had a stroke, because he took the news so hard. Damn it. Jerry breathed out angrily. I know he's crushed. Damn her. Why the hell would Mom have to open her big mouth after all this, especially when he's in such a fragile state? It's probably a drug mix-up, Kelly said. And we all think so. Mom has been taking antidepressants for a long time. You know what she's like. But recently she got a new doctor. I think she met him at the hospital when Dad was undergoing surgery. A new doctor? For what? Oh, I don't know. Mom has always been a hypochondriac. She was hanging around the hospital and no doubt met a bunch of doctors there. She must have persuaded one of them to take her on as a patient. I imagine she didn't tell him about all the medications she was taking at that time because he wrote her a new prescription for nerves, and unfortunately that medicine conflicted with some of the ones she was already taking. This made her somewhat delusional, and she told the whole story to her father during their quarrel. Jerry sat stunned in his seat, his brain working on overheating, trying to assimilate all this new disturbing information. So he might not be my real father? Jerry sighed thoughtfully. No, he is your real father, Kelly exclaimed. Oh my God, Jerry, don't ever think otherwise, please. I know. Of course it's real, he replied sheepishly. You're absolutely right, Kelly. He's my dad, and I love him, regardless of whether he is a bio-dad to me or not. I know that he loves me, he has always loved me, and he will always be my real father. Thank you, Kelly sobbed and reached across the table to take his hands. For a few poignant moments, the brother and sister held hands and shared their grief. Kelly hated telling her brother the truth, but he had to know. After a few moments, Jerry said, shaking his head, what a mess it is going on here. Tony's a jerk for taking advantage of her, and Mom's an idiot. Poor Dad. I can only imagine how he feels about her betrayal. His family is everything to him. I can't believe that Mom can be such an incredible fool. The secret she has been keeping for decades is suddenly revealed when Dad is fighting for his life. What is the probability of this happening? He didn't take it well. How are things now? Is he still with the Blaylocks? Yes. For now, anyway. I can imagine how much he doesn't like living under the same roof with his wife's ex-lover. But he's pretty helpless, and Mom doesn't want to come home to take care of him. She said she was upset and needed Tony's help, Kelly added in a bitter tone. And of course, old Uncle Tony is very happy to help her. She swallowed to suppress her bitterness and continued. But, as expected, Dad hates him now. He made that clear to Tony. And he won't let Mom help him with anything, and neither will Agnes. And how is he coping? It's really bad. Of course, he needs help. There was no one to help without his mother, so they took him to the Blaylocks. Tony gave him a separate room in his house and hired a nurse to take care of him. He has a physiotherapist. Of course, Tony can afford it. Yes, this bastard is rich. We all know that. It's so sad, Jerry. I visit him regularly. But he doesn't want to talk to me or Katie. I think he found out that we all knew, but they didn't tell him. Now he feels that the whole family has betrayed him. He's so depressed that I almost cry when I see him. I can imagine. Poor guy. What a cruel price to pay for all his hard work. He has been a faithful husband and a great father all his life. An honest, hardworking, excellent breadwinner, and look how it turned out. Shit. The brother and sister sat staring at the table, deep in thought. After a while, Kelly looked across the table and met her brother's gaze. I know it's a shock to you. I hate to tell you, she confessed, but I love you, Jerry. We all love. Don't think that this changes anything between us. Katie knows I'm talking to you, and she'll say the same thing. She couldn't be here right now, but it will be tomorrow. By the way, she sends her regards. Thanks, Kelly. You will always be my sister, no matter what, and so will Katie. Kelly signaled for the bill and asked, Are you ready to visit Dad? Yes. I really need to see him and help if I can. I hope he doesn't take it too hard. You know how he is. Yes. He always had a keen sense of justice. Everything is either right or wrong, no semitones. That's why it hurts so much. He can't accept Mom's apology or her reasons why she did it. He's a broken man, Jerry. I don't think he's said 3 words to Mom since they found out. And he glares at Tony. I can't blame him, even after all this time, he said. My mother has known about her affair for several decades, but for my father it is a fresh wound in his heart. The love he thought his mother had for him is now forever tainted. Mom certainly doesn't think so, Kelly said sarcastically. She's acting like she just told him she crashed the car. Mom says that her affair is far in the past, and that she hasn't been with Tony for many years. She doesn't understand why he takes it so hard. I told her that the fact that her affair was long in the past hurt Dad no less. For him, it happened quite recently, and he still feels pain. He's still very upset. Jerry and Kelly rode separately. As they pulled into the long driveway, Jerry saw the familiar sight of the big Blaylock house. It is a 2-story mini-mansion with a huge landscaped courtyard, a swimming pool, and a circular flower garden. Uncle Tony owned 3 car dealerships and several other businesses. His house was a symbol of wealth in this small community. Frank Kilroy and Anthony Blaylock have become an unusual pair of friends. Tony's business success, contrasting with Kilroy's modest financial position, made their friendship unlikely over the years. Of course, now that Jerry found out about Tony and his mother's affair, it made a lot more sense. Jerry and Kelly were greeted at the door by a gloomy Aunt Agnes. Kelly and Agnes hugged and kissed, then Jerry hugged the older woman. The hug was tight, and when they pulled away, it became awkward. She was still a beautiful woman, slender, beautifully dressed, with perfectly styled silver hair. Thanks for coming, Jerry, Agnes told him sincerely. I hope that your being here will cheer up your dad. I hope so too. When they were shown into the living room, Uncle Tony appeared. He was over 6 feet tall, and his burly figure was dressed in an expensive silk suit. On his feet were patent leather shoes made of expensive leather. Smiling confidently, the older man stepped forward, hugged Kelly, and shook Jerry's hand. Jerry noticed his slicked-back black hair, streaked with gray. It gave him a solid look. It's good to see you again, Jerry, Tony said with a smile. I wish the circumstances were better, but I'm really glad you're here. Me too. Drown. Jerry wanted to call him Uncle Tony, but restrained himself. Do any of you want a drink? No, thanks, Kelly replied, and Jerry just shook his head. Where's Dad? He asked. In the room, Tony said, proudly pointing to the large room. We specially repaired it for him when he was discharged. A full-fledged hospital bed, an electric wheelchair, everything you need. All he needs to do is ask. Of course. Jerry and Kelly left the tall man and went into the former cubicle. Jerry was shocked by how small and helpless his father looked. The strong, confident man he had looked up to all his life was a reduced shell of who he had been before. His head was hanging to one side, and he was apathetically looking at his visitors, sitting in his wheelchair by the window. Jerry came over and hugged him. Frank raised his hand, which was still working, and extended it to his son for a weak handshake. Hi, Dad. It's a pity that you had a relapse, Jerry said, trying to start a conversation. Frank nodded weakly. His face showed no emotion, but his eyes were fixed on his son's face. He tried to say something, but the words came out slurred. Jerry leaned closer to hear the man's weak words. At first, he started to pull away, nodding as if he understood. But Frank held his son's hand resolutely, repeating the words many times before he saw some recognition in Jerry's eyes. During their uncertain conversation, Tony and Agnes left the room to leave them alone. Jerry finally realized that he was telling him that he loved him and that he would always be his son. Jerry felt tears welling up in his eyes. He heard a sniffling sound next to him and looked at Kelly. She heard what Frank said and started crying, covering her face with her hands. Jerry began to choke too. "Do you too, Dad?" Jerry said to the old man, his voice trembling. "I love you, and I will always love you. I've heard about the problems with my mom, but it doesn't make the slightest difference to me. Nothing has changed between us, and it will never change, Dad." Frank held up one hand. The other one didn't work too well. Jerry finally realized that his father wanted another hug. He bent down again, and one of his father's arms wrapped around him with amazing strength. He did not immediately let him go. His mouth was next to Jerry's ear, and he was trying to whisper something. Jerry had to listen carefully to understand. Frank's words were slurred, but he was saying something that he thought was very important. Bundles, or moves, or rules, something like that. Maybe Frank was on edge too, because his words were so slurred that he couldn't tell exactly what he wanted. Jerry felt his father getting upset. Therefore, he pulled away, feeling awkward that he could not understand him. They sat with Frank for a while longer while Jerry talked about his wife and various trifles concerning his work and family. Frank's expression turned sour. He looked away from his son and fell silent. "I'll be back in a while, Dad." Frank gave no sign that he had heard him. Edith was in the large, expensively furnished kitchen, sipping coffee. There were empty plates on the table. She must have just finished eating. His mother was wearing a floral print robe, and she had slippers on her feet. Her hair was beautifully styled, and she wore a little makeup. She saw her son enter the room, and her face broke into a wide smile. She stood up when Jerry came in and hugged him tightly. "Oh, Jerry," she exclaimed, "I'm so glad to see you. I'm so glad you came." Kelly called. "I had to come to Dad's," Jerry told her. "We met just recently, and she told me something interesting about you and Tony. It's quite an interesting story." "I'm sorry for keeping you in the dark, honey," Edith explained with a slight sadness in her eyes. "But I didn't want to upset you or your father. You can see how badly he takes it. I wish I hadn't said anything at all." Holy shit, Jerry thought. However, she doesn't look too upset, and he was a little surprised at how calmly she took it. It was probably her confession that caused her husband's stroke. Jerry thought she would be embarrassed by her infidelity, or at least more remorseful, given that it was her fault. "I don't know what came over me," she continued with a sigh. "I knew it would hurt Frank to find out about my cheating. That's why I never told him. It was just something between Tony and me, and Agnes, of course. It has never disrupted my marriage and has not affected Frank over the years." "How long has it been going on?" Jerry asked in a neutral tone. "Oh, for a while, from time to time," his mother told him casually. "Tony and I dated a little bit back in high school, before he married Agnes. It's nothing serious. Everyone was dating back then. Agnes had a couple of guys she dated from time to time, and Tony and I dated. We were all such good friends. Even after we broke up and Tony started dating Agnes, we were still close, and we always went to three-way parties and stuff." As she told her story, her gaze shifted from her son's worried face to a vague spot on the wall. It was obvious that she was remembering a very pleasant time in her life. With a wistful expression on her face, she confessed, "Even after Frank and I got married, we still saw a lot of Tony and Agnes. We often walked, they were at our wedding, and we were at theirs. It was such a fun time. When Kelly and Katie were born, it was one big happy family, all 6 people. I mean, I wish it would never end." Suddenly, her expression hardened. "But when your father left me to take this damn course, I felt so lonely. I was the only one who took care of your sisters and did all the household chores. It was too hard. Tony helped me through this difficult time. Without his support, I would have gone crazy. When your dad came home, I stopped seeing Tony so much. We still managed to see each other, just not that often. He was so sweet about everything. He drove me all over the city and introduced me to many people. He's a really wonderful person, you know? I hope you didn't tell Dad about this? Jerry replied, frowning. Edith was startled by his exclamation and stammered. And what didn't you say? That the guy his wife cheated on him with is so wonderful? Jerry said sharply. A great guy whom he considered his friend? A friend who, in fact, stabbed him in the back? Not the best thing to say to an old sick person. Don't act like that, Jerry, she scowled back. Of course, I know that. It's easy to judge me now. She waved her hand dismissively at him. I'm not stupid, you know that. And I didn't tell him anything like that. I just let him know the truth about what happened back then. He should appreciate that I was so honest. I'm sure Dad is very happy to hear the truth, Jerry said sharply. Maybe he's not happy, she replied reproachfully, but now that he knows, he'll just have to put up with it. It's all in the past, and it's too late to worry about it now. Besides, Frank has a lot more problems than the stupid affair I had years ago. I'll try to help him deal with it as much as I can, but he has to help himself. I'm sure you can help, Jerry spat angrily, outraged by his mother's indifference to such serious things. He deftly spun on his heels and walked away until he exploded at his stupid mother and her reckless behavior. He wanted to ask about his background, but he was too upset right now. This conversation should wait until another day. Kelly was nearby and must have heard his angry remark. She came in, sat down with his mom, and gave him a strange look when he left the room. Jerry went to the library to think. Through the sliding glass doors, he saw Agnes on the terrace at the back of the house, sitting at a table and drinking coffee. He went out and sat down at her table. She hugged him and poured him a cup of coffee, and they started chatting. We never thought it was a bad thing, Agnes told him honestly. Edith and I were so close then. We were roommates, you know, and we did everything together. She gave Jerry a knowing look as she spoke. She dated Tony before me, but when I started dating him, she still joined us on dates. I think Tony still had feelings for her. So, it was natural that she was around. She was such a beautiful girl, everyone loved her, and I really enjoyed her company. Tony too. We didn't think it was a bad thing. And when Dad left for school, Jerry asked tentatively, did you and Tony just take her to dinner? Yes. Dinner, dancing, drinking, laughing, she sighed, gazing thoughtfully into space, reliving the memories. God, Jerry, we had so much fun in those days. Edith, Tony, and I were like the Three Musketeers. Your dad didn't really like going out. He was a bit of a stay-at-home guy and didn't give your mother much companionship. Maybe he worked too hard for the sake of your family. Perhaps, Agnes agreed instantly. I don't think he made a lot of money in those days. But you're right, he worked a lot. When he left for school, it was normal for Tony and me to include your mom in our plans, like back in college. We had so much fun. So you agreed to Tony's affair? I guess so, she said dispassionately. Tony is a handsome guy, an extraordinary personality, you know. We've always been sociable. I knew there was a chance he would walk behind my back. I felt that if he had to be naughty, it would be better with Edith than with anyone else. She won't try to take him away from me, and we were already very close. It was just a natural combination. As I said, we didn't think it was a bad thing. She glanced at Jerry and noticed his devastated look. She came over and patted his hand. Don't worry, honey. No one was injured. I mean, no one would have been hurt if Edith hadn't blabbed about it the other day. And don't blame Mom too much. She was alone, and Tony caught her in a weak moment. He can be very persuasive, you know? She laughed loudly. He's just adorable. Always has been and always will be. I'm sure of it. Jerry was even more disgusted than when he left his mother. Neither of them considered the affair with Tony a cause for concern. He left the elderly woman alone with her pleasant thoughts about the past days and returned to the house. His thoughts were restless until he suddenly came up with what his father had tried to say earlier. Tools. He needs his fucking tools, Jerry exclaimed, pleased that he had finally figured it out. Frank has always been proud of his tools. He had a hand-picked set of craftsman tools that he bought many years ago and kept in the garage. At a time when he had little money, these tools cost him a fortune. In his mind, they have always been a symbol of his talent as a master mechanic. Jerry decided that this was nostalgia, and he should want them to be around to remember their best days. He returned to his father's room and saw that he was looking out the window. "These are tools, aren't they, Dad?" Jerry said proudly. "Do you want me to bring your old tools to the garage?" The old man's bitter frown disappeared instantly. His eyes lit up, and his head began to nod up and down impatiently. "Okay, I know where they are. I think you want them to be here with you. I'll go get them, Dad. I'll be right back." Jerry went to his parents' house. It wasn't far. He had his own key, and he went to the garage, remembering the days when he sat here and watched his father work on the car, trying to earn some money on the side for their underprivileged family. It was just like him to work hard to be able to do a few extra things for his wife and children. He was a great father. Jerry felt a sad tear roll down his cheek and wiped it away. He just wanted his father to get rid of the pain of finding out that his wife had been cheating on him with his best friend all these years. Jerry took the tools back to Uncle Tony's. Tony was gone, but his mom, Kelly, and Agnes were having a heated conversation in the kitchen. They didn't even notice him enter the house, as he immediately went to his father's room. Even with all his flaws, Jerry couldn't help but notice how glad his father was to get the tools. He waved his only working hand in the air, pointing at the corner. Jerry put the tools where he gestured and sat down next to his father. They didn't talk. They both knew that it was too difficult to understand him. Jerry just looked at the old man with all the love he had. He could see his father's eyes peeking out of his disfigured face, those wary eyes brighter than before. When he got up to leave, Frank invited him to hug again. This time they hugged for a long time. The old man didn't want to let him go. There were tears in his eyes, running down his cheeks when they finally parted. "You make me cry," Jerry confessed openly, feeling very emotional. He told the old man, "I'll be back tomorrow, Dad. Don't worry, I'll help you get back on your feet. I didn't know all the things that happened before, but now I do. I'm here for you, and I'll help you. You'll be better than ever in no time. Do you hear me, old man?" Frank nodded enthusiastically. He stared intently as his tall, muscular, dark-haired son left the room. Jerry and Kelly left together. She couldn't wait to leave, as there seemed to be tension between Kelly and the two older women. She didn't tell him what was wrong, but as she passed Jerry, she whispered, "Mom is a damn fool." "What?" Kelly shrugged, but didn't say anything. She said out loud, "Let's go, Jerry. You can stay with me if you don't have a hotel room. I'll be glad to see you. Of course, if you don't mind." They went to Kelly's and talked for a long time about what their family would do. Feeling tired, Jerry went to the room that Kelly had prepared for him. He was undressing in the bedroom when he heard a loud explosion in the distance. Even at this distance, it was so powerful that the windows of their house shook. He ran out of the room and almost collided with Kelly. "What the hell was that?" she asked with a worried look. They both looked out and saw a glow in the distance, as if there was a big fire nearby. "Oh shit," Jerry swore when a terrible thought occurred to him. "I hope I'm wrong, but I think we'd better get back to Tony." "Why?" "I just need to check on Dad." She wanted to know why, but he wouldn't tell her. Jerry returned to the house and dressed in less than a minute. Kelly also dressed quickly and rode with Jerry, and he rushed back to the Blaylock mansion. About half an hour has passed since the explosion. As they rounded the last corner, they saw the flashing emergency lights of fire trucks and police cars in front of the Blaylock house. Tony's house was almost destroyed. It seemed that the lower floor was blown up into the air, and the rest of the house collapsed down, engulfed in fire. Firefighters pulled hoses, sprayed water, and tried to extinguish the flames. But it seemed useless, since most of the house had already been destroyed. "Oh, my God," Kelly was sobbing. "Mom and Dad, are they dead?" "I'm afraid so," Jerry said, hugging his sobbing sister. "They told the police who they were, and the man just shook his head. I don't think anyone could have survived," he said bitterly. "When we arrived, the house was already on fire. No one could get out. It looks like there was some kind of explosion, possibly a gas explosion. We will investigate and find out the reason. But there's nothing we can do today. I'm sorry for your loss." Jerry drove Kelly home. They were sitting in the living room, and hardly slept. The next day they went to the house and saw detectives picking at the smoldering ashes. Jerry identified himself and was allowed to come closer. The detectives began to question him about what they knew. Jerry did not mention the tools he had brought, but he said he thought there were 4 people in the house. "Did you find anything?" Jerry asked anxiously. "Any trace of my parents?" "Yes. We found 4 bodies," the man told them. 3 of them seem to be upstairs. The house is so badly damaged that it's hard to tell. We'll have to identify them later, during the autopsy. The man gave them a sidelong glance and said, "The 4th body was funny. It's hard to say, but we think it was downstairs in the kitchen." "In the kitchen?" Kelly said. "But Dad lived in his office, didn't he?" "Yes. So, this body was in the kitchen," the man continued. "We know because it was near the stove, or what's left of it." "What's so funny about that?" Jerry asked. "Don't tell anyone that I told you that." The man moved closer, speaking confidentially. "But since you are a member of the family, I think the problem is the stove, that it was a gas explosion. In fact, I'm sure of it." "Really?" "Yes. The gas line was disconnected. I don't know how. The connection was damaged, but survived the explosion. From experience, I can say that it was not a leak. This line was specially disconnected." The man leaned even closer and spoke softly to his brother and sister. "It's funny, but the body near the disconnected line was holding a pipe wrench in its hand." "In your hand?" Kelly asked in surprise. "Was he blown off by the explosion?" "No. A wrench was attached to his arm. Literally attached to it." The man said this with an almost funny expression on his face. He wiped the amusement from his face and continued more soberly. "Obviously, he or she had to turn off the line on purpose, after which it exploded and demolished the house." "But why the wire?" She wrapped herself around his arm several times and held a wrench in his hand. "I've never seen this before. Why would anyone want to tie a wrench to their hand?" "I don't know," Jerry said. "Maybe he wanted to guarantee that he would keep him. I can't think of any other reason." "All right," the man cautiously agreed. "But why do it? For what purpose?" "I don't know." Jerry looked at his sister's worried face. When she started to speak, he quickly interrupted her and immediately told the man, "Okay, then. Thanks for the information. Good luck. Here's my business card. If you have any questions," the man said, politely handing him his business card. "I'm sorry about your parents. I don't know what happened, but it doesn't look like an accident right now." Jerry and Kelly exchanged glances as they left. Now he knew for sure that his father had finally taken revenge on his unfaithful wife and her lover or lovers, if Agnes was involved, and Jerry had every reason to believe that this was the case. He was sure that Frank wanted to ensure that his son knew that he had taken revenge on them. It wasn't an accident. As he left, hugging his sobbing sister, Jerry sadly whispered, "Message received. Dad." Jerry was sorry to lose his mother, and a little sad about the loss of Uncle Tony and Aunt Agnes. After all, they had been so close to him as children. But he couldn't help but respect his father, a proud soldier and a man of honor, now turned into an infirm, almost helpless, disease-ridden man receiving his last revenge for the worst insult a husband could face. It was just like his stubborn father not to let it go. "God, I love you so much, Dad." Jerry allowed himself to sob. "I'm going to miss you."